Hey, I'm Justin Barry at the Plains Paris Real Estate Team right here in Kansas City. Are you thinking of moving or relocating to the Kansas City area? Well, if so, stay tuned because I'm going to share my top 5 things that I still love about this city even after I've lived here for 40 years. I'm going to share with you why I raised my family in this city and why I continue to call KC home. Now, stay to the end. I'm going to give you some tips, some advice, and a couple tools that are going to make moving to Kansas City a breeze for you. If you're even thinking of moving to the Kansas City area, go ahead, hit that button, ring that bell. That way you're notified every time one of these new videos comes out. Honestly, we get calls all the time from people just like you that are thinking about moving to the Midwest and considering Kansas City, and they're trying to get all the information they can get before they make a big decision. We absolutely love it. So if you're even thinking of moving our way, go ahead, subscribe, then reach out to us at 816-439-8705 or give us an email at team@plainsparis.com. It's down there in the description. We are here to help make your transition to Kansas City easy. So lean on us, rely on us. We're here to answer all those questions and point you in the right direction. Just remember, when it comes to moving to Kansas City, all you have to do is point the direction and we'll guide you there. Let's get to it. Now, one of my favorite things about living in Kansas City, of course, is the low cost of living. It's a lot cheaper to live here than it is to live on the West Coast. Now, my wife and I, we travel a lot, and when we land in Los Angeles or San Francisco or Nashville, it's sticker shock to see how expensive a drink is, especially in the touristy areas. So here, to go out and have drinks, you're looking at $8 for your typical drink, maybe $6, and at the nicer bars where they have like a mixologist and it's a real fancy drink menu, you might be looking at $12 to $14 on the high end. Now, when I'm out in San Francisco and LA, there's really no place that I've found that's less than $16 for a drink. And I think it's just a good indicator of what it costs to live here. So we're gonna break into, though, what it costs to live here and how much you need to earn in order to have a living wage, to have a comfortable life in Kansas City. So I'm using the MIT calculations that they've came up with at livingwage.com.mit.edu, and you can look at all the different metros in the country. This is a great indicator for us. So basically in Kansas City, you need to make about $16 an hour to be comfortable. Now that's not rich, that's comfortable. So most of the people that we have moving and relocating here, they're generally coming in for a job and they pay better than that, but this is going to be a good indicator for you of what it takes to raise a family, what it takes to be a single adult here, and what it is for a couple. So if you scroll down here and look at typical expenses, they break all of this down by the year, so it's a little bit confusing, but what you really need to look at down here at the bottom is how much money do you need to make to have that, a normal life, just a comfortable life, right? So a single adult with no children can get by pretty well in Kansas City on about $35,000. Generally, most of the people I have that are relocating here, they're usually coming as a couple and they have a couple kids. So let's just look at that for grins as well. 2 adults that are both working and have 2 children need to make about $98,000 a year in order to afford a big enough house. And keep in mind, that's $98,000 together. So, $44,000 a year each, and you're gonna have a pretty comfortable life. So we looked down here at like annual salaries. Most of the clients that we have moving to the city, again, they're coming here for a job. It generally pays good enough to justify moving across the country, but we do have a lot of people escaping expensive West Coast and East Coast pricing, and they're coming here not necessarily with a job, and they're shopping at the same time. So the main employment in Kansas City is going to be a few different things. Number one, healthcare is a big deal here, and we have one of the largest healthcare software providers, which was Cerner. Now it's bought out by Oracle. A lot of people in the city are going to work for those. A lot of people work for Garmin, which is a tech side of our city as well. Then we've got lots of hospitals and lots of healthcare. Now outside of that, we have a bunch of manufacturing and we have transportation. Kansas City's a big transportation hub, so trucking and rail and anything related to warehouse and manufacturing is definitely here. So there's lots and lots of options for work, but even the fast food places are paying more than $16 an hour in our area. So to have a comfortable living wage really isn't that difficult in Kansas City. Now, if you look down through here, it's going to give you some typical annual salaries. So like a management position at a corporation, it's going to be right around $109,000. And in my experience, that's pretty true. Keep on going down. Teachers here making about $52,000 a year. That's true as well. I do know some teachers that do, better than that. Most of the schools here reward you for extended education. Healthcare support, that's not going to be like a nurse. That's going to be administrative or those types of duties. So don't let that confuse you. Nurses do very well here. Healthcare practitioners, there you go, $70,000 a year. But that gives you an idea. Your typical office job, administrative support is going to be in the $41,000 range. So plenty of income to be able to afford a house and have a comfortable, normal life. And again, that's why so many people who have done all the right things, went to school and, went out on the West Coast for school, did all the right things, and they can't afford to live a comfortable life even after they've done all the right things. They're looking at the Midwest, and this solves a big problem for them. All we want to do is be comfortable and earn a good living, and Kansas City really offers that. Now, my wife Tara and I travel. One of the things that, again, is a little bit of a shock to us is getting used to the density of other cities. When we go into places like Chicago or Philadelphia and you're getting a two-top table and you're rubbing elbows with the guy next to you and there's enough spot on the table for your plate and a drink and your silverware is tucked under the plate, that's not Kansas City. I don't even know of a single place in the whole city that is that dense. In fact, in Kansas City, you can walk into a restaurant and say, I'll take the corner booth for one, and nobody's going to bat an eye. We have a lot of space. Again, as we've said before, Kansas City's 8,500 square miles, which is almost the same size as the state of Massachusetts. We have plenty of room. With that said, you do have to know that it's a big town and requires cars. So that means things are spread out. We're not all jam-packed into a downtown area. So benefit of that is when you go to a restaurant, you're going to have some space. Now, this is not a tourist town. So a lot of the other cities, you really have to avoid touristy areas. The locals stay in their little areas, but in Kansas City, it's not like that. There's not really a touristy part of the town. Now, when there's a convention in town or a concert, you're gonna see people congregating around the Union Station area or down at Power and Light. But again, I bet you even on those occurrences, 70% of the people there are locals. Now, my absolute favorite thing about living in Kansas City is really what's been happening in the city the last 15 years or so. They have invested so much into our downtown area that it's revitalized the entire city. It used to be that you wanted to escape further, like in rings, you just escape, the next generation would move another ring out, and nobody had anything to do with the downtown area. But about 15, 20 years ago, the city decided they were going to remodel Union Station and they were going to do the Power and Light District. Most people in these further rings thought that was a waste of money, and I think they were proven wrong by this point. Now the city it's like a brand new city downtown. There's so much to do there, and there's a lot of investment. It's great for our economy. That means that the city, when they're making developments, they're actually building stuff for us to use, for local people to enjoy, and that's really cool. So since we're spread out and we have great highways, that means we can travel across the city in no time. So I'm going to show you where I live at and what it takes to get to some of the most popular destinations in our city. So I live up here in the Northland. So let's just say I live in 64155. That way you can't stalk me, right? So this is my area. And let's just say we wanted to go from 64155 down to Power and Light District, Kansas City. So that's right downtown here. It's a straight shot down 169. Now keep in mind, there is a bridge that is out right now because they are rebuilding a new bridge. So this is actually including a little bit of a delay and some roads merging together. Right now it's 3:11 in the afternoon, so we're not quite to rush hour time, but it's there's still definitely traffic going on. So 22 minutes, 14-mile drive, and that's getting to the downtown area. Now another really popular area is going to be Overland Park. That's where most of the best shopping, most of the malls, most of that stuff's going to be at. So let's pick it. And if we were going to be traveling to there from my location, for instance, it's a 30-minute drive. So all the way across the state line, other side of the city, it's only going to be 30 minutes. Even if we're looking at Lee Summit, which is one of my very favorite places to go hang out, it's downtown Lee Summit, we're looking at 34 minutes. Now that's hard for a lot of people to understand, but once you get on the highway in Kansas City, you're going 60, 70 miles an hour, so you really are getting 1 mile a minute. Now one thing that's very common about somebody relocating to Kansas City is they think they need to live right by work, or they think they need to live in a certain part of town to have these amenities, because when you live in a place like Chicago or Los Angeles, you really have to stay in your little section of the city. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of risk on time, for instance, to to try to commute or try to go do something. So most people that live in Long Beach stay in Long Beach, for instance, or different areas, they stay in those areas. But Kansas City, it's not like that. You can live in Liberty and work in Overland Park or work all the way out in Olathe. I, in fact, used to work all the way out at Olathe when I was younger, and we would take the long 435 route around. So it's 45 minutes, worst case scenario. So it's about 39 minutes typically to get to work. I mean, that's not ideal, 39 minutes, but in a lot of cities, 39 minutes is normal. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody that lives in Olathe, work in Liberty or vice versa, but it does give you an idea that you have a lot of choices. So that's my recommendation, is definitely pick an area that you love, not a place where you work, okay? Now, if you're coming from California or Florida or a lot of other coastal areas, you'll find that insurance is very expensive in those areas. Like right now, California, getting an insurance policy, like State Farm's no longer even offering them there. I think Nationwide's pulling out. And down in Florida, they're rated up. Some of the people I know in Florida, their insurance more than doubled in the last year. Now, that's because of natural disasters. Now, Kansas City, we really don't have that many natural disasters. Everybody comes to Kansas City and says, well, what about the tornadoes? Well, let's talk about the tornadoes. Number one, a tornado, it doesn't affect an entire city. You'll have a storm cell and you'll have a tornado that comes down and it goes through an area. Generally, it doesn't hit any neighborhoods, but when it does, it's only going to take out where it is in a line. That's different than a hurricane. It's different than an earthquake. It's different than wildfires, right? Now, here's a map of all of the tornadoes that occurred in the year 2022. Now, I want you to look at this. There's really not a whole lot of tornadoes that happened. If you look over here on this legend, they go from EF0 to EF5 or EF0 rather. And a F5 tornado is a bad tornado. So these fours, you see these reds, those are the worst tornadoes that happened in the country last year. None of them happened in Missouri. In fact, if you look at this map, Missouri is almost completely void of tornadoes. There's a few that have happened. They've been EF1s and EF2s. Now, the EF1 and EF2s, those are generally not where they touch down, but it's a storm cycle. You'll see the meteorologist talking about how there's rotation in the sky or cloud walls and that type of stuff. So a lot of times, don't quote me, I'm not a meteorologist, but in my experience, that's what these are. They're common, in the spring. From about April to June, you'll have, the storms. But again, that's 2022, and that's as many as we've had. Where are most of the tornadoes happening? They're happening from Texas all the way over, almost to Florida. So it's Mississippi, Alabama, and that's different. That's not what we've seen in the past, but with all of the weather changing that we've had, the Gulf of Mexico's getting warmer, so that dry air is coming down, meeting that hot air, that hot, moist air, and it's happening in those areas more now than it was before. And at one time, tornadoes were much more common in Missouri. But when I think back in the last 20 years, I haven't really seen tornadoes. I remember getting out of high school and tornadoes were a lot more common, but really haven't had that problem for 15, 20 years. And when I look at this map, it only solidifies that and only just drives that point home. Now, one of my other favorite things about Kansas City is that the job market's stable. We don't generally have this big layoff or this big catastrophic event that happens with employment, even when we look back at 2008, 2010. And not to say there weren't problems here, but they were nothing like what we saw on the news. So I want you to see here, this is the house price index. So this is not necessarily the dollar amount, but it's the index they use to compare house prices. So what I want you to look at is this is the 2008 crash right here. And you can see, yes, the market did dip a little bit, but it's nowhere near what I'm going to show you here in a minute. Now, one thing about the last couple years is everybody's convinced that the market is just way overpriced in Kansas City. Especially if you live here, you think that it's just, the sky is going to fall. But we've been doing this a long time. What I like to look at is just the straight line. If you put a straight line from 1980 all the way up here to 2023, it pretty much lays out straight. The market has just now caught up to where it would have been if we didn't have the dip of 2008 through 2014, right? Now, our dip didn't fall dramatically. It did come down. The whole country came down, but we did not have the volatility that you're going to find on the coasts or a lot of other larger cities. Now, take a look at what happened to Los Angeles. You can see here, this was all that refi boom. All of the real estate market was really running hot, and 2008 hit and it crashed. So this is what happens on the coast, and when we're watching the news, this is the volatility that they're always talking about. Unfortunately, if you live here, everybody's watching the same news nationwide, and then they don't know what they're talking about with Kansas City, and they assume that what happens in LA and happens in, in Florida and Phoenix is what's happening in Kansas City, and it's not. The straight line rule doesn't really apply the same way with Los Angeles. Would not surprise me to see that they have a recession there, as obviously it looks like they're climbing at a faster rate than the Midwest is. So these are the markets where it's just volatile, and you can see that. So this is because the job market there is not the same as Kansas City. Our job market is based on things that everybody needs all the time. We don't generally have that ebb and flow. So people are always going to need, food. They're always going to need clothing. They're always going to need oil. Those things are delivered by rail. They're always going to need, cars, or they're going to need healthcare. They're going to need the software to manage healthcare. Those are the types of industries that are common in Kansas City, and that's why you're not seeing that ebb and flow in our market. So let's just take one more peek at like Phoenix, or let's grab Tampa. So in Tampa's going to be one where people were buying secondary homes. They were taking advantage of what they thought was a great economic climate, that there was a lot of great financing options. So people were buying a second home in Florida, and you can see that whenever that came to a head in 2000, actually it looks like it started crashing there before 2008, they started dumping their houses. You had to choose between, where do I live in my second home? I'm going to keep the one I live in and let my second home go. And you can see that they had a lot more volatility. Now the same things have happened the last few years. All of a sudden financing is really easy. COVID makes people think, I don't want to be stuck at home. I'm going to go get me a house in Florida where they're not making us mask up. It creates a bubble. It pumps up the market. You can really see that that's what happened. Now the straight line rule across here, I still think it was appreciating faster in Tampa than what the straight line rule would show. If we have a typical 2 to 3% appreciation, the market stays with it. I think they were outpacing that, and you can see that. But definitely the last few years, it's shot up, dramatically. So when we look again at Kansas City, you're just not seeing as much of volatility. Obviously, markets affect us, but not at the same rate. Now, when it comes to visiting Kansas City, here's a couple tips. I would recommend staying in the downtown area and really experiencing that whole downtown vibe. It's going to make a lot of sense. You're going to understand why the city wants to be close to the amenities. There's a lot of really cool hotels down there. They're not too expensive. That's what I would recommend. Then I would go check out some barbecue joints, because that's part of the Kansas City culture as well. Decide whether you're an Arthur Bryant's fan or a Gates fan. But then once you do that, I would go and do a little tour. I'd go hit Overland Park. I'd drive over to Lee Summit and visit the downtown. I'd go up to the KC North area, check out the North Kansas City area, and then maybe Zona Rosa or the Liberty area. And that's going to give you a good idea of how the city really lays out. If you're a little overwhelmed and you can't figure out which spot might be for you, there's a lot of personality to the city. So what I would recommend is that you take our free personality quiz. It's simply 11 questions, and we'll be able to tell you where in the city matches your personality. Save you a whole bunch of time. It's a lot of fun, and so far it's been very accurate. If that's not enough for you, of course, reach out to us. We do this every day, and we know how to save you a bunch of time and have you looking in the right places based on what your needs are. Every part of the city is larger than it probably looks on a map, and we'll be able to find those pockets for you that match your needs, even if you really want to be close to work, or you really want to be close to family, or there's something you need to be near. Chances are we know of a small pocket that's going to meet your needs. So reach out to us immediately at 816-439-8705. You can give us an email at team@planesparis. Again, hit that button, ring that bell. It does a lot for us on the algorithm, and it's going to keep you informed. And remember, when it comes to moving to Kansas City, all you have to do is point the direction. We're going to guide you there.